Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Lisa Maurer, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. Before we begin, please silence all phones and electronic devices. Additionally, please refrain from any interruptions to the debate as it is being recorded for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform and public education measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. The system provides clean funding for qualified participating candidates who agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules. These include contribution and spending limits, forgoing special interest money, and participating in commission debates. We encourage audience questions, so please utilize the note card handed to you when you entered the room and hold it up when you have those questions. Our volunteers will pick up the cards and bring them to me. If you need additional cards, just raise your hand. If you have a question for a specific candidate, please include the candidate's name on the note card. It will be considered during the second half of the debate. Now, when those questions come in, we do screen those for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for about an hour and a half this evening, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight's debate includes 1-minute opening statements, and then the first half of the debate begins with 2 minutes for each candidate to answer the same question. After all candidates have responded to the question, the first responding candidate will have an additional 30 seconds. We'll rotate which candidate responds first for each question. The second half will allow a different question per candidate with 1 minute to answer and an optional 30-second comment from some of the other candidates. And we'll end with 1-minute closing statements. We ask that you remain polite to all of the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said. So tonight's participants are Juan Mendez, a Democratic candidate for State Senator, District Number 26, and a Clean Elections participating candidate. Rebecca Speakman, a Republican candidate for State Senator, District Number 26, and a Clean Elections participating candidate. Isela Blanc, a Democratic candidate for State Representative, District Number 26, and a Clean Election participating candidate. Athena Salmon, a Democratic candidate for State Representative, District Number 26, and Clean Elections participating candidate. And Raymond, or Ray Speakman, a Republican candidate for State Representative, District Number 26, and Clean Elections participating candidate. Now, the order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last names, starting with the Senate, for opening comments, and will progress from that starting point. The order for the second half will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last names, starting with the House. So we'll get started with some opening remarks. So, Juan, will you start the opening remarks, please?
Thank you. I want to give thanks to the Clean Elections for making politics without dirty money possible. I want to thank everybody in attendance and for those watching online. My name is Juan Mendez, and I am running for re-election to continue working towards an end to the political and economic inequalities that too many of us work so hard under to provide for a better environment for our families and for our shared future. I come from poverty. I know what instability is. As a first-generation American that lived with domestic violence growing up, my poverty was both generational and situational, but I wasn't a poor person. I helped my single mother struggle, trying to do magic with part-time jobs and food boxes while she went back to school. And today I'm grateful for my personal success and stability, but I owe it to my community and all the governmental services and nonprofit programs. I'm a product of Kids Care, Access, food stamps, and child care assistance. I'm here because I know firsthand that if we're going to be successful, we need to have investment in our community. And that's the best way to contribute to our collective and shared good fortune, both economically and socially. And so with your vote for re-election, I hope to do more together for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Speakman. I'm 32 years old. I live and I work right in the heart of historic downtown Mesa. I'm a small business owner who, along with my husband, own and help operate a plumbing company. I'm also a full-time realtor, a part-time writer, and a few days a week I coach. I coach small group fitness training classes as well as Olympic weightlifting, actually, at a small functional fitness gym outside of North Mesa. I am a wife. I've been married to my husband for 12 years, my high school sweetheart. He's easy enough to spot. He's always the best looking man in any room. We have 3 children together, the best kids that I know. I'm a soccer mom. I am a dance mom. I'm a basketball mom. I am a public school parent. I'm a PTO mom. I'm a busy working mom. And with all that going on, you might ask yourself why I'm running. I'm running because I'm concerned. I'm running because there are issues that I care about, and I look forward to the opportunity to addressing those in the state Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. Isela.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isela Blanc. I just completed my first term at the Arizona State Ledge. First and foremost, I was formerly undocumented. I say that because I am proud. I am proud because in 1986, Congress could come together and provide a pathway to citizenship. And here I am, a state representative. Second and foremost, I was an educator. I worked as a school liaison. I ran early childhood programs, and in part, am proud of that experience. But the most important thing in my life has been a mom. I'm a mom of a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old. And as a mom, I've experienced a lot of things in our school system. And what I can tell you that as a state representative, what I've done is I've done everything to defend and to fight and to, more importantly, raise the voices of the many parents and teachers. And we saw it. We saw it in May with teachers coming up and fighting for education. And that's something that I'm committed to doing. And so my name is Isela Blanc. Thank you.
Thank you. Athena.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Athena Salmon, and I'm running for re-election to the State House. Growing up in a multi-ethnic family in Arizona, I developed a deep appreciation for our country's shared history and future potential. Like many of my fellow Americans, my experiences taught me resiliency, diligence, and the importance of community. I am best known for tirelessly working to advocate for vulnerable populations by standing up to powerful institutions. This year, my bill, HB 2222, inspired national outrage over the inadequate supply of feminine hygiene products for women in our prison, leading to immediate change. This fits a long history of advocacy for public education, working families, women, children, and immigrants, resulting in multiple acclaims for this work, including the City of Tempe's MLK Diversity Award. Having attended public schools my entire life, I was proud to be at the Capitol supporting Red for Ed, and I ask for your vote this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray, your opening comment.
It's so good to be here this evening with everybody, with friends and family, and these folks that have run before and have served our district here. And a little bit about me, I was born and raised here in Arizona. I was born in Cottonwood, in Arizona, on a chicken farm there, and then moved here to Mesa about in 5th grade, graduated from Mesa High. I've raised my family. All 8 of my children have graduated from Mesa High public schools, and now part of my grandchildren go to public schools and others to charter schools. But I'm so glad to be able to run. You know, it's great to be able to serve the people of the district, and my whole goal here is to really help those in the district to have a voice in the legislature. And I'm just grateful to be here and look forward to doing good things in LD 26.
Thank you. At this time, we will begin the portion of the debate where each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. And Rebecca, you will start for us. And the first question is, if elected, what would be your top priorities, and what would be the first piece of legislation you would want to submit?
Sure. Thank you so much, Lisa. What I can tell you about me is that my top priorities at the State Senate are the issues that I think affect my children and the issues that I know you think affect yours as well. My top priorities include education. They include caring for our at-risk youth, and also women's issues, which are very near and dear to my own heart. The first piece of legislation that I would be interested in introducing is working together with fellow senators to find a way to finally, sustainably, fully fund public education in our state. I think that restoring dollars to public education budgets and creating even greater accountability for those dollars would be my top priority. We need to find ways to strategically and responsibly increase program spending for the things that we care most about. And like I said, for me, that's education, and I think that probably is true of a lot of other people in this room as well. The things that we spend our money on really do speak volumes of where we hold our highest values in our community. So that would be the first piece of legislation that I would be interested in, is finding a way to work together with others to fully fund and restore dollars to our education system. Thank you.
Thank you. Isela, same question.
So it's pretty clear that we have to understand when we talk about education what that means. And for me, it's about making sure that we are actually investing in our public school system. Let me repeat that, our public schools. 93% of families living in this legislative district are choosing public schools for their kids. And as someone who went through the Tempe Elementary Public School System, who graduated from Tempe High, understand the value when we actually invest in our kids. So this last legislative session, I introduced important bills related to charter schools and making sure that charter schools are actually accountable and making sure that there is true transparency. I'm going to continue to advocate for that. I'm also looking, as many of you have heard, we have a state representative. His name is Farnsworth. He has profited greatly from opening up charter schools with public dollars, our tax dollars. Now he's ready to gain close to $30+ million. And so I'm going to start looking at legislation to figure out what are the loopholes? How can we fix it? How can we keep an eye on making sure that people, especially legislators, no longer profit off of the backs of taxpayers? It is critically important. We also need to start investing in our most vulnerable communities. I recently spoke with Deborah, who's very concerned about her intellectually challenged daughter, disabled daughter, excuse me, and what she's concerned about, and we recently found out, is that there's a request for proposal that's happening, and it's going to impact our most vulnerable communities. The request for proposal is supposed to go out to any healthcare company who's interested, which means that those healthcare companies are more interested in profiting off of the backs, again, of Arizonans. So we need to start fighting and making sure that we are defending all of Arizona, our working Arizonans, which is literally 90% of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Athena, same question.
Thank you. So it is undoubtable that the top issue in the state my entire life has been public education and generating the revenue to adequately fund our schools. I'm a millennial. For every single year of my life, except for 1 year, the conservative majority legislature has cut Arizona taxes. And because of the decreased revenues, we see the declining in revenues for our schools. So that's number one. The other crisis that every single woman in Arizona faces, and specifically every single woman of reproductive age, is the crisis of the National Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. Arizona has some laws on the books from back when we were a territory that not only criminalizes any woman who's had an abortion with a mandatory minimum of 1 year up to 5 years in prison, but it also makes it a misdemeanor to advertise not only abortions, but contraception. This is a crisis. And if Roe v. Wade falls, you will see these antiquated laws passed before women in this entire country even had the right to vote come into effect in a state like Arizona. So not only do I plan to sponsor legislation that would address our education crisis for our schools, but I think it's critical that every single candidate up here and every single candidate running for office either sponsors or supports legislation to repeal the barriers that conservatives have placed over women seeking reproductive freedom and replace it with laws that will empower families all over the state.
Thank you. Ray.
Sure. Again, I think with what's happening in the state, education is really the number one issue. There's a lot of things we have to look at with education. And again, as I stated in my opening statement, all my children went to public schools. I have 22 grandchildren. Many of them go to public schools, but some of them do go to charter schools. One of the very important things and a good thing that the state has done is providing choice for parents. There's challenges with many of the children, and public schools can't answer all of those questions. And so the choice, it's a parent's responsibility to provide education for the child. And so that's one thing that Arizona has done very well, is to provide that choice. Now, I completely understand and agree that we have a crisis with the public schools, and the funding for them have to be addressed. As we look at the budget, our Arizona budget is $10 billion. 50% of that budget goes to education. That's why it's such a priority. It takes almost half of the budget of Arizona. Now, as we look at the money that actually goes to the schools from federal and from the state and other sources, education runs almost $9 billion. And so it takes a lot of money, and we've got to take a look at really where those funds are coming from, where they're going, and make sure they're allocated properly. Charter schools need to be monitored, and they need to be kept in control because it's public funds, but they do answer challenges that are there for the children. And there's a number of other issues here in the state that I would want to address. Business is close to my heart because I have been a small business owner, and really the balance between education and business is critical. Education is important for business, and business is important for education.
Thank you. Juan.
Thank you. I've only ever known underfunded schools in my existence in Arizona. I've worked as a substitute high school teacher in underfunded schools. I currently help students at the community college level that have just been entirely cut off from state funding at their community college level. And so this last session, I was extremely insulted by the sad excuse for an attempt to put money back into schools. And then I was, again, discouraged when the Arizona Supreme Court, that's recently been stacked by Governor Ducey, took the initiative that the Red for Ed movement helped create to put some money back into schools. It was never going to solve the entire problem. We definitely need to have some kind of fix at the legislature. And so when I go back to the legislature, one of my top priorities, again, is going to have to be trying to put real money back, new money into our education system. And so I am looking for ways to, as you're probably aware, there won't be a way for the legislature to increase revenue without 3/4 of the legislature voting for it. And so I am going to look in, research and investigate ways to fix the problem that the Invest in Ed initiative had, and to get it back on the ballot so that we can get more money into schools. If I had a chance to focus on anything else besides education, I wish we had a time to address, all the economic inequalities that we have going on right now. I've been looking for a place to buy a house in my district for the last couple of years, and I'm totally priced out. I have legislation to help create and support permanent affordable housing in Arizona. Unlike housing programs you've heard in the past, this would keep the houses that we already have in our neighborhoods and keep them permanently affordable. And so those are the kinds of things I wish we could be focusing on, but we're going to have to fix our schools first.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have an additional 30 seconds.
Thank you, Lisa. I just want to reiterate, it's like I said before, education is a top priority for me for a whole variety of reasons, but not the least of which is the fact that I am a mom. I have 3 elementary age school children. They are all in elementary school, and I am proud to say that they all attend our local neighborhood public school. I truly believe that when we talk about fully funding education, Our duty and our obligation is to figure out how to fully fund public school systems and to build strong, viable public schools, not just for now, but for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our second question. And this time, Isela, you will start with the responses. There's a stack of audience questions here around education. And so some of these questions have to do with what is your position on increasing funding? What would you like to see in the education system changed? Red for Ed. So let's make that question, where would you like to see the education system changed, more specifically?
So let's be clear, first and foremost. Yes, it is true that Arizona state budget is less than $10 billion. It is also true that about half of it does go to education. However, because the state has continuously given money away to large corporations, we should have and should be at closer to $14 billion. Also, let me remind you that in 2008, there were $1 billion more than there are today in education. And also, let me remind you that since 2008, we have 500,000 more people. So when we're talking about education and the priority, let's actually start having real, authentic conversations about what the budget is and what it looks like and where most of the money is going. And it's going to large corporations that are more interested in making sure that they're profiting and taking our taxpayer dollars. And here's the thing. Corporations, they're not going to come to our state, and they're not, because 10 years ago, they used to look at our state, and they looked at a few things. How much am I going to get in tax credits? How much money is a certain government or state agency or city going to allow me to get away with and not pay in property taxes? And also, it was seen as a neoliberal state. But guess what? Currently today, the reason we're unable to attract high-paying jobs, because the number one question they're asking, is there a workforce? Currently, there is not. We need to start focusing on the 1.2 million children here in the state. We need to start developing their skills. So I don't even know how to answer the question other than we actually need to start having real conversations, whether you're Republican, Independent, or a Democrat, about what it means and what our budget looks like and how we've been failing our kids before my son was even born. It is unfair, unacceptable that children are in underfunded schools.
Thank you. Athena, same question.
I absolutely think that we need to provide more funding for our education system. The fact of the matter is, 10 years ago, our system had $1 billion more than it does today, while we have more children in our state. But the thing about Red for Ed is that Red for Ed was never singularly about teacher pay. And it was very disheartening to be at the Capitol, having received the 5 demands from the educators who were part of the movement, be narrowed down into one issue, all the while teachers, social workers, nurses, principals, the entire educator community was meeting with me in my office, telling me stories about how in the school district I grew up in, the Paradise Valley Unified School District, how when one educator took off the bulletin board in her classroom and found termites behind it, the school couldn't afford to fix it, so she had to just put the board back up and hope things didn't get worse. I asked one educator, what do your children dream about? This was a 4th grade teacher in the Roosevelt School District who lives in LD 26, and she said to me, they don't. They don't dream about anything. In fact, they tell me this building feels like jail. And so, yes, we need to address the severe underpay of our teachers. My aunt's been a teacher for 2 decades, and like many of her colleagues, are underpaid. But we need to also restore funding so we can repair our buildings. We need to reform charter schools where we see lawmakers rigging the system to become multimillionaires while our children suffer. And we need to end school vouchers.
Thank you. Ray.
Thank you. Yeah, again, Education is such a big issue, and it's amazing how many of us really have and live around teachers. I have a daughter-in-law who's a teacher at Highland High, and she recently quit because of the challenges that were there for her. I mean, she was working 70 and 80 hours a week and not getting the pay that she needed. I have a sister-in-law that was a teacher that recently retired. I have a principal who's a good friend. And it's really a common thread that that the schools really are overcrowded and there's too many students in them. There's really an interesting relationship though between education and business. As stated, the workforce that businesses look at really start with our education. And so it's really vital that as we look at education, to look at the resources that we can gain, that we can get to put into the schools. Businesses are interested in helping education. I've worked in business, I've had small business, I've had 2 or 3 businesses of my own. I've worked for larger companies and I work for a smaller company now, but they provide education opportunities. As we work with businesses and other organizations out in the sector, I truly believe that there's opportunities for funding to help with our education because we have to have that base to be able to have businesses come in and have a good workforce. Those businesses will participate. But it is definitely something that we have to have meetings on and work with teachers and find out what the needs are and work with businesses and really create that coalition because within our district we have universities and schools, many of them.
Thank you. Juan.
Thank you. Our underfunded schools, our school system right now, the way that it is, it's not an accident. This is not just some kind of slip at the wheel kind of thing. A couple semesters ago, I was subbing for a freshman and senior English class that took longer than 2 semesters for the school to find a permanent teacher replacement. That's not an accident. That is somebody purposely setting up our public schools to fail. And so we are up against an orchestrated attempt to undermine public schools that are not charter schools, in order to prop up charter schools and make them more attractive. And so, again, this is not an accident. If we're going to solve the lack of funding we have for our public schools, we have to first stop giving away your tax money. The investment that you put into our communities, as soon as the legislature gets their hands on it, they give it right back away to Arizona's top wealthy income earners, and we let so many corporations get away with paying just $50 a year in terms of taxes. That's just unacceptable. We collect very little capital gains tax, and we rely way too heavily on sales tax in Arizona. That's just not a recipe for growing our school system. And so after we stop the bleeding and put more money back into schools, then we'll have the kind of environment that's productive for our students to be learning in. But we're still going to have, there's a lot more heavy lifting that we're going to have to do. It's insulting that we still live in a kind of society where your zip code determines how much investment your child receives to reach their potential. That's just pitting people against each other. It's not the level where we need competition for our students to do better. Our students just need honest investment.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Sure. So the question was, what would I like to see change with regards to education in our state? There's a whole list of things. And I think that a lot of people in this room might agree. It's like I've said, education would be a top priority of mine if elected to serve as state senator. I know that it's through education that opportunities are open. I also know that we need to be able to find a way to afford those opportunities to every student in our state, regardless of the path of education that they pursue. I believe that the only way to be able to sustainably do that is through building strong public education. I believe that that's our obligation as legislatures, is to find a way to sustainably fund education. When I say sustainably fund education, I am also talking about the salaries of our teachers, school administrators, support staff. It takes all of these people to provide a quality education for our public school children, and I believe that's what absolutely every child in our state deserves. Some of the other things I'd like to see change with regards to education in our state, I'd like to see a greater focus on high graduation rates. I agree with the statement that was made earlier that high-quality workforce, or I apologize, businesses are interested in coming here to our state when they see that we have a high-quality workforce. And a high-quality workforce starts with a well-educated student body. So I'd like a higher focus on graduation rates and college readiness for our students as they move through the public education system. Like I said, with the end goal being a well-trained and a well-educated workforce ready to enter the real world. I do support school choice, and I think that's another thing that I would like to change is kind of the public versus charter school narrative, but I do agree that we must demand reform, greater accountability, and transparency from our charter schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Isela, your 30-second comment.
So inequity is a huge problem in our state. An example in inequity is after-school tax credits. So when you look at a school within our district, the Desert Vista, they can collect over $100,000 for after-school tax credits. Then you go to my school where I graduated from, Tempe High School, they have a difficult time because guess what? A lot of the families that go to Tempe High School don't even make $32,000. And because they don't qualify, they can't even donate the $200 or $400 to their child for their after-school program. So let's deal with the inequities as well.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our third question. Athena, you will start this one. And so there's a stack of questions around immigration. So I'll summarize those into what is your position on immigration issues in Arizona, including your position on open or closed borders?
Thank you for that question. So, because of the immigration system, it actually is the fabric of my own family. My dad's sitting in the front row tonight, and my dad is an immigrant, Palestinian from the Middle East. He came in the 1970s because he saw America as a country of freedom and opportunity. My mom, it's her birthday, everyone, wish her happy birthday, is born in Chicago to immigrant parents. My grandmother, who's sitting next to my mother, was born in Germany and came in the 1950s on a boat. And my grandfather came to this country from Mexico on a work visa because he saw the freedoms and opportunities that America had to offer. And so every single day when I think about immigration, I think about my family story. And I think about how through different pathways, my family members were able to come to this country, literally made this entire dream possible. And I think that we are doing a disservice to immigrants today by not pushing harder on Congress to comprehensively reform our immigration system. In fact, we know that undocumented immigrants in our communities have no pathway to citizenship. Contrary to popular belief, there is no pathway. People are stuck for decades without a legal status, and because Congress remains in limbo, people cannot fix that status and remain in the shadows. The other component that I would like to explore further is this administration's attack on the refugee resettlement program. Under this administration, he has drastically cut back the number of refugee admissions, and this is something that the state legislature should speak out against as well.
Thank you. Ray.
Sure. And as we all know, immigration is a federal issue. It's a very difficult thing. We can talk about it all day long and discuss it. But the real question is, as Isela has said, is that there's very little we can do except for push our congressmen to act on it. So as I've thought about this, there really are two types of people that are trying to come into the country. You know, we're all immigrants. My great-great-grandparents came in from England and from Holland. I mean, the United States is a country of immigrants, and that is what's so beautiful about it. Every single person here has immigrant ancestry. But we do have a real challenge today because within Arizona, because we border, you know, our southern border is with another country, we have some very serious challenges in our state, and it affects our state. And so as a legislature, I would very much want to work as much as we can with the federal government to make some changes, because there are people at the border. We met a couple of weeks ago with a lawyer who has been working with those children and the families at the border, and there's some real tragedies there. We need to be able to help them. But yet, also at the border, we have a lot of crime that's crossing the border. I was reading some FBI reports today, and it is amazing the amount of drugs and crime that is coming across the border. And so, you know, we have to provide that pathway to citizenship for those who want to be here and want to truly serve and want to be part of us. But we need to enforce laws against criminals who are endangering our families, endangering our children, bringing drugs in, and we need to get them stopped.
Thank you. Juan.
Thanks. So I'm a first-generation American. My family is from Mexico. My family worked the fields on both sides of the border. My family was welcomed into America when my grandfather got a work visa to help do rebar for Arizona's major power infrastructure. My grandfather helped build the Palo Verde power plant and the Navajo generating station. So I know that America is successful when we respect and encourage immigration. Immigration is essential for an economy to work in our globalized world right now. And I want to echo some of the thoughts that that of course immigration is a federal issue. But right now at the federal level, they seemed only concerned about finding ways for capital and for corporations to be able to move across the border a lot easier, taking advantage of a potential workforce. And Arizona seems to be concerned with nothing more than just hate. SB 1070 was the worst thing in the world for our the social fabric that all of our communities rely on. We have to put an end to, and we're going to need an initiative to do it. We have to put an end to the segregation of our English language learners in our schools. I'm a substitute teacher, and I've subbed for some of these classes. They are a waste of time for everybody, and are only holding back our students who are some of our most vulnerable students. And so, in order to combat the hate that is SB 1070 and all the other hateful legislation that the legislature has passed, I have introduced legislation called the Trust Act that would do a lot to repair the trust that's missing in our communities. Everything that the legislature has done, including SB 1070, has only made our communities less safe. And so we need to rebuild those relationships. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca.
So yes, it's been mentioned, immigration is a federal issue. Obviously, we know that. But also it is an issue that very much affects us. It affects our communities, the people that we live and work amongst. It's happening right here in our own backyard. And so, we need to do what we can to make ourselves aware and to address the issue any way that we can. I would like to echo another sentiment that I think has been said all across the board up here at this table just now, that this is an immigrant nation. And I think that we would all do well to remember that, right? It is inscribed on our very Statue of Liberty, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, right? We have been a nation that has long held these values, that we should welcome with open arms those who come to our country, whether it be that they are in need, whether it is that they are seeking help or aid, or even just those that are coming here looking for a better opportunity. I think that probably few among us would disagree that America has always and hopefully will always continue to be a land of opportunity. And who are we to deny those opportunities to anybody who would seek them? Now, all that being said, it is reasonable for us as a nation to insist upon strong borders. And if we're going to have borders, it seems silly to have them if we're not going to enforce them, okay? So what I think that we can do as legislatures is to call for comprehensive immigration reform that provides a very clear-cut path to citizenship for those who are not currently in our country but who want to be. We need to celebrate that. We need to welcome them with open arms, and we need to make that process as simple and as comprehensive as possible so that they can be here to live and work among us. In addition to that, we need to provide a clear-cut path to either citizenship or at the very least community for those people who are already here within our borders. We want them to stay. I agree that they are working, contributing members of our society. Our economy depends on them. We are lucky and blessed to have them here among us in America. Thank you.
Thank you. Isela.
Obviously, this issue is important to me, but first and foremost, we are blessed to live in a state like Arizona. And the reason I say this is because in the state like Arizona, we have over 20 indigenous tribes, people that are from and have been here way before any of us. So the only people who we've never thoughtfully asked what they think about borders are the indigenous people. I'm reminded of that because of my colleague Eric Dashini, who constantly reminds me of that. As I said, I was undocumented. My undocumented story is vastly different than those that we identify as DACA recipients or people that are living here without papers. When I moved to Arizona, I never feared that I would come home to find my parents gone. I never feared getting on the road and having a sheriff that no longer is here, thank goodness, arresting or taking my parents away. And what we've done with immigration over the last couple years is we've used it as a tool for hate and division. We fail to actually authentically have conversations about why people are immigrating to the United States, because we are okay with paying low wages and not having to be responsible for basic things like health care, sick time, and we can abuse immigrants because they are unable to stand up or fight. That's what it's about. It's about basic greed. And in 1986, when the immigration reform passed, it was a good idea. But the reason it failed is because businesses didn't want sanctions, because they were happy to continue to get away with hiring immigrants. Let's have real conversations about immigration reform, please.
Thank you. Athena, your additional 30 seconds.
I was recently on a panel with legal scholar Arjun Singh Sethi, who recently authored a book, American Hate. And in the first chapter of the book, he describes our beginnings. America was founded on a hate crime. We killed the indigenous people who were here, and we slaved Black Africans, people from abroad. And so any conversation about immigration needs to take this context into consideration.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. Ray, you'll start this one. According to a study published in 2018 by the Association of American Medical Colleges, the U.S. could see a shortage of 120,000 physicians by 2030. What do you think the legislature can do to prevent this shortage in Arizona?
Thank you, Lisa. That's a very good question. Our healthcare is our second largest item on our budget, and it ties, but yet this issue ties directly to education. I have a nephew who just waited 2 years to get into the Maricopa Community College nursing school. It took him 2 years to actually, after he applied, to get into it. And many of the colleges that offer the education for nurses and so forth, it's very, very expensive. And so in the legislature, I think we could do a lot to talk about, how to truly make it easier and provide more classes, more teachers in our community colleges to where they don't have to wait as long. Because to wait 2 years is significant. If we can cut that down to a year or even less, there's a lot more that could get through it. The other thing is we could take a look at actually making it to where nurses, and qualified nurses and those who have got their education through that can actually then do more services, do some of the services that the doctors are doing now. So it's a multifaceted thing that we're going to have to take a look at. But I do believe that there are answers as we do work with the colleges and with some of the private sector colleges that actually teach nursing. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Juan.
So my answer, what I would like us to focus on to addressing the physician shortages. There's a lot of different things that we can do, but one of the main things that's stopping our pipeline of new physicians is it's just ridiculously expensive for higher education right now. When I was graduating from ASU, I was only paying $4,000 a year, and now we're asking incoming freshmen to pay over $10,000 a year. I just would not make that decision to go to school if I had to do that today, let alone the idea of asking to take on so much debt that would be required for me to go to medical school. It's the kind of life that we're asking our new physicians to take on. It's just harder and harder, and we're going to have less and less people wanting to do that. It's way more complicated than that. But I mean, simple things like loan forgiveness for people who are going into this field would probably help us out a lot. But I too, I want to echo Ray Speakman's idea of allowing educated nurses, people who are already trained, to be able to do more. The current legislature has been taking back a lot of the responsibilities that our nurses could be sharing, so we have to undo that. But I mean, a real answer to this that you may not see as connected would just be allowing everybody to get on Medicaid. Expanding access to everybody in Arizona and not putting such a high income barrier on it, so that more people can be using healthcare, so that less people are then reliant on emergency room visits for healthcare, and then that would help solve our problem that we have in our reimbursement rates for our physicians. Right now, the state and all the other entities involved in healthcare, it's just they're not making enough money to cover what they're being asked to take care of, and so getting more people on healthcare would solve their problems.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Great question. Thank you, Lisa. So I have a little brother. His name's Brian. He's a few years younger than me. He's a clinical psychologist who lives on the East Coast. He is a highly trained medical professional. His wife, Avion, she is a cardiovascular surgeon. They're younger than me, by the way, and an incredibly accomplished power couple, right, in every sense of that term. They are both highly qualified medical professionals. They have worked and dedicated over the last decade of their lives to achieving that status. And what they are left with at the end of that journey, he and I were just discussing this very recently, actually, is upwards of, get ready for this number, $300,000 of debt between their combined costs of medical school, what it took for them to achieve what they've achieved in the medical field. This is an issue not just here in Arizona, but all across our countries. And the shortage of medical professionals is especially detrimental for people in rural areas. It's a supply and a demand issue. So the question is, what can we as legislators do to address it? And I actually think that there's a lot that we can do. From a legislative standpoint, I believe that there are programs that we can create, outreach programs. Let's talk about internships, placement programs, things like this that would incentivize a whole new generation of people to become reinterested and reinvested in the idea of entering the medical profession. I also think that we as a society can change the way that we view a visit with a doctor. There's no reason why, with the technologies available available to us as a society today, we can't imagine a future too far off where maybe a visit with a doctor is a Skype phone call. And obviously that's not going to be feasible for every ailment, but I think certainly for some, and that would help address the issue that we have of the shortage of medical professionals. Again, it's been said across the table, but I agree with the sentiment that we can look to other qualified individuals, nurses, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants, and find ways to allow them to practice more independently as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Isela.
So thank you to the person who posed that question. It excites me, and I'll tell you why. It's been something that I've been talking about with doctors. We do, in fact, have a huge shortage of medical professionals in our rural communities, and here's the thing. We need to start investing in people. So imagine a world like Arizona, a place like Arizona. So instead of throwing money away at corporations that literally don't trickle down anything, they make sure that their money goes to the shareholders and the CEOs, making millions and billions of dollars, not allowing or investing in people. But if we actually invested in those people that want to serve their communities. I've talked about like U of A. We have a medical program here in the state of Arizona, but guess what? People who are practicing can't even stay in our state because there aren't any residencies, so they end up going to other places. And everything shows that if we actually have people that stay in the state and do their residencies, they stay in the state. So investing in people and creating opportunities to actually, instead of giving money away to corporations, investing not only in doctors and nurses and psychologists that can go into the schools, but incentivizing them to stay in places that really need the experts in our rural communities. And then not only that, our rural communities are suffering. They still haven't gotten out of the recession. And it's when people are employed, when people know that they have a good job, it is when people know that they can rely on things like health care, sick time, a retirement plan, they start spending in our economy, which means that they're going to do better. So we need to start investing in the people here in Arizona, making sure that we are providing and incentivizing them to continue their higher learning, becoming doctors, becoming nurses, and incentivizing them to go into the communities that need that help.
Thank you. Athena.
That's a great question. Our physicians today are triaging a very sick system, a broken system in healthcare. I'll give you an example. My cousin is a plastic surgeon, and she has found that the bureaucracy and the troubles of dealing with insurance, her method of payment, has cost her practice so much money that by accepting insurance, at the end of the day, she ended up losing money. And so now her practice no longer accepts insurance. This is a problem. And you know, the United States, our healthcare system is the most expensive healthcare system in the developed world, and yet you would expect to have the highest outcomes, but we have some of the lowest patient outcomes at the end of the day. And so we need to reform our entire system, because at the provider level, at the patient level, at the taxpayer level, we are just throwing away money. We need a single payer system. No American in this country, no person in this country should ever fear going bankrupt because of a disaster like a foreclosure, losing a job, another family member gets sick. And if we were to adopt a single payer system, we will see more people in our healthcare system to provide more funding for our physicians and for our other medical professionals in the healthcare system. I think I have time for one more point. I was on the Banking and Insurance Committee, and I was disheartened to see the Republican-controlled committee continue to rig the state in favor of insurance companies, including against our patients. We need reform.
Thank you. Ray, your 30 seconds.
Sure. You know, I have been throughout my life in business, personally and owning my own business, and then also working for other corporate companies. And at this time, I work for a company that provides all of our insurance premiums. And it still amazes me to see that there are really opportunities out there as we let the free market system really do its job that will help increase physicians and help increase health care for individuals.
Thank you. At this time, we will transition to the second part of the debate, where each candidate will receive a separate question with 1 minute to respond. Additionally, the other candidates will have an optional 30 seconds to address the questions. Remember that you can still submit some questions via note cards and direct them to specific candidates. So the first question is for Ray. Ray, what is your position on increasing Arizona revenues, and what would you recommend in that area?
Good question. Again, I go back to business because truly businesses are the lifeblood of everything that happens. You know, there's a story of the little red hen that I always go to, that the little red hen asks for help, and she goes to work, and nobody wants to help her, and she does the work, and she makes the bread, and then everybody wants to eat it. When we really look at businesses and we incentivize them to help with the economy, they do it. And businesses, again, there are some real challenges still, and there are still some greedy people out there, but businesses is the lifeblood. If we stymie them, then we can't increase any revenues. And so what I would work for is to actually work with businesses to actually give more revenue and to help.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? So Juan, we'll start with you. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I just want to respond by saying no government should ever run themselves like a business. That only benefits a very small select few of people in our state when we run our government finances like how a business would. And even then, I mean, the analogy is always broken, because no business in their right mind would ever turn down revenue or is not constantly looking for new ways to bring in revenue. So this metaphor or analogy of running our state like a business is just wrong.
Thank you. Okay, Isela, you have 30 seconds.
First and foremost, small business. I'm a big supporter of small business. And in Arizona, when Arizonans are talking about small business, we're talking about mom and pop shops, the coffee shop just across the street called Dr. Bob's. Right now, Arizona is giving away their money to large corporations that they identify as small business, because as long as they have up to 500 employees, they qualify as a small business. So again, we need to really, how much do we care about the state? Let's start having real conversations of what revenues look like in this state, and also vote no on Prop 126. Thank you.
Thank you. Athena, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. So I want to add that we can do something about revenue now. I sponsored a bill, the Carried Interest Fairness Act, because it's one of the many examples in which we tax the wealthy at a lower rate than everyone else. And because we prioritize the wealthy over our children, it's the exact reason why millennials like myself never went to a fully funded public school in Arizona.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'll just say really quickly that generally speaking, when we talk about the budget, right, what we're talking about is money in compared to money out. Where's the money coming from? Where's the money going? So when you ask the question, what can we do to increase revenues for our state, I think it's important that people understand that typically speaking, every year that the legislature passes a budget, the governor signs it, more often than not, our state does actually generate more revenue above and beyond the amount required for that budget. It's the tax cuts that continue to be proposed that really eat into that excess revenue. And I think that practice needs to stop. Thank you.
All right. Athena, this is your question. An audience member would like to know, how can we strengthen women's rights in Arizona?
We are one state away from ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment. You know, for my mother's entire life, for my grandmother's entire life, and for my entire life, we have lived in a country where women have not achieved full equality. And you need to look no further than our U.S. Constitution that does not protect any individual in this country on the basis of sex. We are one state away. And I was proud to be a co-sponsor of the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. And I was proud when the Democratic Caucus multiple times in 2017 and 2018 tried to compel our friends on the other side of the aisle to join us in declaring equal rights for women. We have the highest percentage of female lawmakers in the country. What is the big gap in the reason why we can't get this done? I think everyone can fill in the blank there, and we need to elect true pro-women candidates who will get equality for every single woman in this country.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? Okay, Juan, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I too want to just add that, I mean, the women in my life have been the most hardest working people that I've seen in order to try to raise their families or to contribute to society, and almost everything is set up against them. One thing that we could be focusing on is equal pay for equal work, and then you know, I have a young sister who's getting ready, you know, thinking about what she's going to be doing with her future. And we all know in our family, if she's going to decide to have a child, it's going to be the most expensive decision she's going to have to make. And I wish there was more support for that.
Thank you. Okay, Rebecca, you have 30 seconds.
I just really quickly want to say, because I think it's important for you to know that I am a feminist. I always have been, and the people close to me wouldn't argue or debate it. That part of my identity, I especially became comfortable with and confident in after the birth of my daughter 8 years ago. You need to know that I understand that women's issues are civil liberties, civil rights issues, and that they are indicative of larger and even systematic discrimination against all kinds of minority populations in our district, in our state, and all across our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment that in the last, 9 months that I've been working with Rebecca, I can vouch that she's a feminist, and she has schooled me very well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on. Isela, the next question is for you. As a legislator, what will you do to combat the special interest and priorities of such groups as lobbyists or special interest groups?
So I've been doing it for 2 years. As mentioned earlier by my seatmate, Mr. Mendez, we run as a clean elections, which means that we specifically rely on voters living in our district to contribute. And so I don't have to rely on any lobbyist to support my election. And that is really important, because I have to tell you, lobbyists really don't come and visit me. The only time they come into my office is when they are really close on a vote and they're counting votes. And that, to me, is incredibly powerful. Believe it or not, getting money out of politics should be a priority for all of us, every single one of us. It is money in politics that is hurting us. An example of that is in 2010, governor's race was less than $500,000 of out-of-state money. And in 2014, when Governor Ducey ran, over $10.5 million was given to his race. We need to get money out of politics, and that's why I'm proud to be a clean elections candidate.
Thank you. Would anyone care to weigh in? I think.
Sure.
Juan, go ahead. You have 30 seconds.
The idea of getting rid of the special interest that controls too much about politics. Everybody should be educated on how unique it is and special that Arizona has a clean election system. We're one of the, as far as I know, for how important ours is, we're one of the few states in the entire country to have something like this. It is beyond me that we let anybody else work the other way. The idea that you can privatize your public office or your public campaign for office is just beyond me. It's setting it up for corruption. And so everybody should be running clean.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have 30 seconds.
I just figure this is as good a time as any to take the opportunity to thank the Clean Elections Commission for doing what they do. It is so important to keep dirty money out of our political race. That is the way that we can maintain the integrity of these kind of political processes. I'm sure that the people sitting here at the table with me understand that for Ray and I as Republicans, particularly to run clean elections, is not necessarily typical of people in our party, but it was something that we felt really important that we wanted to be able to do and to be able to say about our campaigns, because it is so important that that dirty money not be allowed into our political climate.
Thank you. Athena, you have 30 seconds.
This issue is exactly why I joined the government committee, because not only have we heard bills that make it easier for special interests to rig our political system, but we have heard bills that have attacked our citizens' constitutional right to get things like Invest in Ed on the ballot. And so we need major reform in our election system, and it starts with campaign finance reform, but it doesn't end there. We need to make sure that voters are empowered to register whenever they want, among a slew of other election ideas.
Thank you. Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. Again, it really is a wonderful thing to have clean elections, and we're grateful to be able to run with clean elections. And so, yeah, at this point, I would kind of want to give a plug for Prop 306. I think that there's a loophole there that needs to be closed, and so vote yes on Prop 306.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. Rebecca, you have the next question. It's a follow-on to a comment you made earlier around saying that you are a feminist. And so can you speak a little bit on your views on a woman's right to choose?
Yes, thank you for the question. All right, so in order to understand where I come from with regard to this issue, you first need to know something about me. I'm adopted. I was adopted as an infant. That adoption was as a result of my birth mom's choice to choose life, all right? But regardless of that fact, it remains very important to me that she, as a woman, had that right to choose, right? Life was her choice, but that was her choice to make. I do believe that that is every woman's choice to make. That's not shocking, right? We all know that that right was guaranteed to women in the 1973 Supreme Court ruling of Roe v. Wade. Please remember that I am saying this as someone who personally would choose life. However, I'm also saying this as someone who feels and truly believes that it's not the government's place to dictate those decisions. I do believe that it's vital to reduce the number of unintended pregnancies, and I believe that as legislators, there's something that we can do about that. We can offer comprehensive prevention education and also policies that would expand access to contraception for women everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? Athena, you have 30 seconds.
I'm so glad to agree on a lot of what was said. I think the step forward then is to get commitment to repeal all the unnecessary barriers, because you can support the right to choose, but if you create so many barriers, which our state is one of the #1 state that has decreased access to making a choice of whether or not you want to terminate a pregnancy, then whether or not you support that at the end of the day is moot. We need action, and women and men in our state deserve it now.
Thank you. Juan, you have 30 seconds.
I want to thank everybody for their comments in regards to women's rights. And I want to thank Rebecca for being so honest with your approach of feminism. I too would consider myself a feminist, and I have introduced all kinds of legislation to repeal this attack on women. I mean, right now, Arizona is probably one of the worst states in the entire country to plan for having a child. We just hold, we take too many options off the table for women, and it's a shame.
Thank you. Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I know I'm going to be in the minority on this, but to me, as like I say, I have 22 grandchildren, and I think about each one of them in the womb, and I have one of my daughter-in-laws right now that have a baby in the womb. And I know that when that child is even that small, it is still a child, and that life needs to be protected. And there's also all sorts of social programs we can work with to help women, and I think men have a responsibility in there too, but life is vital.
Thank you. We're going to move on. Juan, the question is for you. An audience member would like to know specifically how you will invest in your community.
So I have lots of legislation that is going to be helping us all. The two that have gone, the one that's gone the farthest in this Republican-controlled legislature is my attempt to support and create more permanent affordable housing. And so for those that are not familiar with Newtown Community Development, they're a huge resource for people in our community to help first-time homebuyers get into housing. And so that is one of the first things that would help our whole community. And the next real simple thing that's at the same time is a jobs program and something to liberate many women is we need to increase the subsidy we have for childcare assistance. I benefited from childcare assistance. My mom had somewhere to put me and my siblings so that she could work her second job, so that she could contribute to society. And right now, we're holding we're holding too much potential back right now because the laws are just not written to support us.
Thank you. Would anyone care to weigh in? Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, I've lived in the same place for 35 years, and my whole life has been investing in our community. I have served in many positions. Again, as a small business owner, I employed 5 other families, and I've supported them through that business, and I will continue to do things like that, supporting small business and education throughout our district so that our district can grow economically and become a better place.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have 30 seconds.
I would just like to quickly say that, again, I think the issue of investing in our community begins with education. I am going to work towards investing in my community by investing in our public schools as a legislator. I know that a lot has been said about education tonight, specifically K through 12, but I believe that investment in education doesn't stop there. I believe that it needs to continue beyond, whether that be through tech training or through, higher education. We've got a number of great colleges and universities right here in our own district that I look forward to being able to help invest in as a legislator. Thank you.
Thank you. Athena? Oh. Okay.
I just look really.
Athena, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. So on that question, one of the things that's missed, but Senator Mendez already covered it, was funding childcare assistance. The fact that childcare for an infant is the equivalent of the cost of 1 year at the University of Arizona, for a new family, that's just unaffordable. And when we saw the state, when it's shifted from a Democratic governor to a Republican governor, start slashing drastically things like childcare subsidies, we saw an increase in our foster system for neglect. We should change that.
Thank you. We'll move on. The next question is for Ray. Ray, what do you think the role of government should be in helping Arizonans and their families get out of poverty?
I think that the role of government to help people get out of poverty is, number one, to provide basic services. They need to be there. But I believe strongly, because I've lived my life this way, that to be able to go out and work, I started at the age 16 delivering furniture. I've owned my own businesses. I've worked for other businesses. And so for me, it's to provide those working opportunities to start a company and to build a company, and then also to be able to get that education to be able to work in a company and be productive. It is vitally important that, as Rebecca mentioned, that we do provide those educational opportunities in vocational schools. I love that EVIT is in our district. It's a great school that provides some great opportunities. And as we, as a government, invest in opportunities like that to help people to stand on their own 2 feet, that's where we'll succeed.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? Juan, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. With my 6 years of experience in the state legislature, I have seen the Republican-controlled majority practice what they like to talk about as tough love, but it's definitely this like sink or swim approach to people. If you're doing well, they're tripping over themselves to give you a tax cut so that you could do better. But if you start falling behind, they blame it on you, like if you're just not working hard enough. So that's totally backwards. And no matter what you think in terms of your personal success, it's entirely dependent on public investment. And so we're going to need more public investment to help people in poverty.
Thank you. Isela, you have 30 seconds.
So we do need to start investing in people. And so often, as Mendez mentioned, my colleagues across the aisle are happy to really hurt people in poverty. It's obvious and it's apparent, and it's actually kind of sad because we are more than happy to allow Representative Farnsworth to benefit from our taxpayer dollars, but God forbid that we give a couple $100s in food stamps, and every year we're finding ways of cutting those resources to our poorest.
Thank you. Athena, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think it's the role of government to actually recreate and re-strengthen our anti-monopoly and antitrust laws that we have just completely neglected. Case in point, companies like Amazon, companies like Google have just been able to consolidate, and then you have small business owners like my parents who just simply can't compete. We need to do something about it, and that's the purpose of our government.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Athena, the next question is for you. Can you speak to your position on how religious implications should or should not be considered when making laws?
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate, personally, living in a country where the First Amendment protects everyone's right to practice their religion privately. I think that's important because we see in other countries people having to flee because of religious prosecution. I don't think people understand that we are facing the highest global displacement crisis in modern history. 68 million people have had to flee their homes and are living in refugee camps, largely because of religious persecution. However, the Constitution does not give anyone the right to impose your personal religious beliefs on another private citizen. That's violating all of our constitutional rights, and it's wrong. And we need lawmakers who will stand up and protect the religious freedom of all of us, and not just a select few.
Thank you. Would anyone care to weigh in? Juan, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I won't take the whole 30 seconds. I just want to respond by saying, this is the legislature is what it is, and I've experienced my share of whatever you want to call it, ridicule or people picking on me for me not sharing similar views with them just because I'm a little bit out of the norm. But I want to end by saying that it is possible for people to be good without God. And we should be a more welcoming society to allow people to be able to contribute politically.
Thank you. Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. One of the things that I am running on is truly that the Constitution, First Amendment Constitution is religious freedom. And that means for all, whether they have a religion or not. And that's one of the things that is one of those rights as citizens. Is I had a call at my home the other day, and just a simple question. He says, "Do you believe in religious freedom?" I said, "Yes." And he asked, "Do you believe in freedom without religion? And I said, yes. And so that is, it works both ways.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Isela, the next question is for you. What is your position on climate change and what can be done to maintain our state?
It's so interesting. I participated in a press conference where we talked a little bit about the fact that in Tempe, in 1972, the year that I was born, we experienced less than 160 days of over 100 degrees, and now we're past 170. The fact that it's September and it's over 100 degrees. I remember Thanksgivings having to bundle up in a sweater in the 80s. And now Thanksgiving looks like shorts and air conditioning in the home because it is just darn hot. I asked a Republican gentleman who is on the corporate commission, I won't name him, and I asked him very softly, I'm like, do you believe that humans are leaving a footprint and that is why there is a change in our climate? And he said, I will deny it, but yes. Yes, humans are leaving an imprint and we need to start thinking more progressively, innovatively to address it as quickly as possible, or we will not have an Earth. It will kick us out.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? And Rebecca, you can have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just kind of want to piggyback off of what Isela just said about her private conversation with a Republican colleague and him confessing, okay, I'm not going to admit this publicly, but, yes, I obviously believe it and can see the implications of climate change all around us. I'm sitting before you today as a Republican candidate and happy to publicly proclaim that, yes, I don't think there's any arguing the implications of climate change and that we definitely need to be mindful and take responsibility for our role in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. In terms of climate, I just want to say that we are not experiencing bad weather right now. This is a climate crisis that we have created. And so I want to take my 30 seconds to say that I'm supportive of the Clean Energy for a Healthy Arizona initiative, and I encourage you all to look past APS using all of your money to try to convince you to vote against it, and look forward. We need your support in order to source sustainable and clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I work for a company where we're very, it's an agriculture company, and there is climate challenges now and climate change. I have to disagree with Mr. Mendez on my mind just went blank, on the proposition for clean energy, because that is bad for the people. It is going to raise rates. I agree 100% with clean energy, but not in the way they're prescribing. It's a bad law.
Thank you. Athena, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. It's an atrocity that we are still reliant on the antiquities of the Industrial Revolution when there's an emerging potential green economy that creates high-paying jobs versus global warming and leads to further innovation. And it is global warming, and this is a crisis. And so everyone should vote yes on the Clean Energy Initiative because countries like Germany have done it. Other countries have been able to do it. Don't believe the fear-mongering. Let's take action today.
Thank you. We'll move on, and the next question is for Rebecca. Rebecca, an audience member would like to know, if elected, are there any specific examples in which you might differ and vote differently than the majority of your party?
That's a great question. And the answer is, I imagine yes. And I imagine if you've been sitting here tonight and you've been paying attention to the things I've been saying, that probably wouldn't come as a surprise to you. I think it's probably clear just in the hour and a half that we've spent together that yes, I'm a Republican candidate. And yes, a lot of my political views do align with some of those more conservative ideologies. However, again, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that a lot of things that I say probably don't fall in line with some of those typical Republican views, and I'm completely okay with that. I would describe sort of my politics as being closer to center. But more importantly than where my politics lie, I will tell you that the strengths that I'm going to be able to bring to the Senate are the fact that I'm an attentive listener and that my goal in the Senate is going to be a cooperative problem solver. I think that right now we have far too little of that going on in our local leadership, and it's a problem. And it's a problem that trickles down and affects every single person in this room, regardless of where you think you fall on that political spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? Isela, you have 30 seconds.
So what I can tell you is what we are lacking in the Arizona State Legislature is people with ethics who are willing to stick to their core values, because I've seen it. When we voted for the voucher bill, I saw people that considered themselves moderate, people that never would have considered voting yes on the voucher bill, but guess what? The arm twisting from Governor Ducey started to happen. Guess what? They started pouncing on them, putting them into the speaker's room, and making sure that they were doing everything to get their vote. So we need ethical people willing to stick to their values.
Thank you.
May I? Do I have an opportunity to respond again?
Actually, we'll see
No?
if other
Okay, that's okay.
candidates.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move forward. This is actually our last question of the evening. Juan, this is for you. How would you address the water shortages in Arizona?
Wow. So this, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about this going forward. It's a shame that so much of the political, whatever you want to call it, stopped the Republican majority from passing anything to do about water. They couldn't come to an agreement about our problem. And you know, I would love to tell you a story about how much I love the environment and you know, and try to make it personal, but this is way too much of an important issue for me to just you know, give you a political answer. And so there are very practical things that we should be doing for water. The very first thing that's dear to my heart is we have to establish legal protections for our rivers. We've killed too many Arizona rivers, and we are in the process of attempting to kill another river. And so our rivers need protection. But there's a lot of partnerships we can go into with our cities to just remove all this needless grass that we spend so much water on. There's partnerships that we can go into with the public to offer temporary rebates to get rid of all these water consuming products that are taking too much water. And so that's just the beginning.
Thank you. Would anyone like to weigh in? Isela, you have 30 seconds.
We are in crisis mode, people. Our water shortage is less than 2 years away. Less than 2 years away. That is not an exaggeration. It is a fact. And we are in trouble. So the fact that we continue to try to idealize our state when we are experiencing hotter weather and definitely going to see water shortages, we need to do something. It's critical.
Thank you. Athena, you have 30 seconds.
This is one of the most pressing issues, and my concern is that most people aren't thinking about it as a crisis. And one of the first things that the legislature can do is stop favoring development over the lives that live here. And that does not only include human beings, but as Senator Mendez mentioned, that includes the natural environments and the life that depends on the water for survival. It's all an ecosystem, and if one falls, all of it falls.
Thank you. Ray, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, there is a real crisis with Lake Mead where it's at, and there are many conservation things that we can do that needs to be addressed with the legislature. Again, I work in agriculture, and as Mr. Salmon has mentioned, you know, it is an ecosystem. And so there really is a balance between how we use our water, where we use our water, and for what purposes. And I think as a legislature, we need to step back and really take a look at how we can really manage that, you know, to prevent the crisis from going forward.
Thank you. At this time, we will move to our closing statements. And the first closing statement will be given by Ray. You have a minute.
Thank you. You know, it's really been fun being here tonight. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and it's great to be in this district. And as Rebecca has said, one of the things, you know, I am definitely Republican. I'm definitely constitutionalist, but I also am a great listener. And in this district, we have a cross-section of people. Democrats, independents, and Republicans. And I know that as we go into the legislature, it's so important to be able to listen to all, to open up those doors. We've met with, Rebecca and I have met with the ASU, some professors there. We've met with some Democratic leaders and so forth. And our whole purpose for running is to be able to cross the aisles and work with everybody that's there, so that we don't have the tribalism and the fighting, but that we can get something done. And that's really why we're running, is to be able to really get something done in the legislature without all the contention that is there now.
Thank you. Athena.
As I mentioned in my opening statement, one of my life's burning passions is to protect our most vulnerable communities. And the reality is whether or not you find yourself as an individual who traditionally finds your rights under attack, under this administration, everyone's rights is on the line. And so we need to make sure everyone votes at record levels and supports candidates who have a proven record in fighting for you. That is myself, that is Representative Blanc, and that is Senator Mendez. We made a commitment in 2016 to not take any special interest money, to run clean, and to fight for the issues that every single day LD 26ers face in our communities. We have fought for our schools. We have fought for women's rights. We have fought to reverse global warming. We have fought for the LGBTQ community and immigrants, including DACA recipients and refugees. We have a proven track record, and if you send us back to the legislature, we will continue to fight for you.
Thank you. Isela.
Thank you so much. So absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that is exactly what we've been experiencing in the Arizona State Ledge over the last 2 years. But here's the thing. I'm excited because people like Terry, like Hannah, Debbie, Royce, and the many of you who decided to show up to the Arizona State Capitol in May and ask that we actually start fighting for our kids, our future, Arizona, our economic sustainability. It's because of you guys that we actually got more money into education. And yes, I was a no vote, but I was a no vote because we were actually stealing from one pot of money, because there is no money to give to teachers who haven't seen any money for close to a decade. This is a crisis. We have a water crisis, and there are so many crises, so we need to make sure that we are electing people who are willing to work hard, but more importantly, to stick to their values, are willing to stand up for people every single day, and that is something that Representative Salmon, Senator Mendez, and I have been doing, and we will continue to do. Fight for you every single day. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca.
I just want to thank you all again for coming out tonight. I want to thank you for paying attention to what's going on politically here in our district and all across our state. It is so important that we have more voters willing to take a vested interest in their political processes. So thank you for being here and for paying attention. I guess I just want to say in closing that I'm not a party person. I'm a policy person, and that is my pledge to you. If I have an opportunity to serve you as a state senator, my pledge to you is to be there, not as a party person, but as a policy person. I believe that this district deserves good representation. The people in this district deserve good representation. And I know that there was a lot of finger pointing that happened, particularly from my opponent tonight, towards the Republican-held, majority that's going on at the state capitol. But the fact is, as a member of that majority, I will have opportunities to get things done. This district has an opportunity this election season to elect representatives that would allow for bipartisan representation, and I think that is so very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan.
Thank you all for your active citizenship. You don't get enough credit for it, and it's very encouraging. And thank you for your great questions. But the reality is, I could get reelected in November and not be able to accomplish anything if I get elected alone. And so for me to be successful, I need Representative Salmon and Representative Blanc to get elected. But I also need you to vote up and down the ballot Democrat to make sure your friends do the same, so that we can all be successful on a state level. If you turn out to vote this election, we could be working with a Democratic state Senate majority. So because of low pay and term limits, I'll be one of the few state senators with institutional knowledge of the last 6 years. I could run for leadership, I could chair a committee, and undo all this Republican damage that's been done to our state. If we're going to prosper together, our resiliency needs to be fortified with public investment. Your individual success, however you want to frame it, was built on investment in public institutions. We need to source revenue in responsible ways in order to make much needed investments in our education, our health, infrastructure, transportation, everything. Thank you.
Thank you. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating in our forum. And to our audience members, we thank all of you who took time to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov/voter-dashboard for a customized experience to find information on the election, the candidates, the issues, and to view this debate on demand. Please fill out the debate evaluation form and return it to one of our volunteers. Your feedback is important to the commission and will help improve future debates. Thank you all for coming this evening, and you are welcome to stay and speak directly with the candidates. Thank you.